you ever walk by a restaurant or a shop and then, everybody tries to differentiate themselves by giving them a fancy name or have a punny name.
Try and be creative.
Try and be creative,
Yeah.
try and be cool. Some are cringy, but then you walk past one and you're like, hang on a second. Isn't that the name of a criminal?
And then you quickly whip out your phone and have a quick look.
And on Google and you're like, yeah, it kind of is.
Yeah.
Is that the right name? Sure, I'm wondering. So here's the thing. Mafia is not what my country is proud of. That's what Italian ambassador to Singapore, Dante Brandi, said in response to Gotti Italiano, a restaurant on Amoy Street named after an infamous criminal, John Gotti. He had also organized an event called Hip Hop Mafioso. Okay, for context, John Gotti was a mob boss of Italian descent who led New York City's Gambino family, once described as America's most powerful crime syndicate. He was convicted of 5 murders in 1992. And then back to the present, we've got the Gotti Italiano restaurant now apologizing. And it's going to consider all options moving forward in naming itself.
But this has raised concern on what businesses here will do to create a buzz for themselves, as you said, Daniel, earlier, to be cool. Glamorizing crime as a marketing tactic could in fact display embarrassing ignorance and lead to big pitfalls as well. Well, for more, let's talk to Dr. Dinah Chung, Senior Lecturer, Marketing Program, School of Business at the Singapore University of Social Sciences. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Chung. First off, your thoughts on businesses here glamorizing crime as a marketing tactic, and would you advise against going down this path?
Yeah, so basically I think it's a bad idea. So they actually know that there could be potential risk, but they just decide to play with fire. I think that's actually a bad decision. But of course, in marketing, we always try to do innovative things. It's not like it can always be very serious. There's no entertainment, but you need to draw a fine line in between being cool, the entertainment value, versus like socially responsible marketing. And I think another thing that is very important is to realize that actually the name of any brand, including restaurants or any other brands, is the most important asset for the company. The brand equity is very, very important. So that's why we need to always be very, very careful, because usually companies invest a lot in building the brand. So you don't want to damage it easily.
Do you think that it's coming from a place of wanting to tread that line of being cool and edgy, or is it actually coming from a place of ignorance where maybe, oh yes, Italian restaurant, I've heard of this Italian name before, okay, we'll call it that. Like, could it be actual ignorance? Do you know what I mean?
I think it's mainly for fun. I think they should know this name, but they just want to play the fun side, the entertaining side, or from the branding perspective, they just want to draw attention to be different, which is like to establish branding. Being different is the most important thing. Like Apple is think different, be different, but we need to be careful about how to be different. I think it could also be playing around what we call a region marketing, meaning that they want to be associated with certain countries or places, and they can leverage on an existing name which can be associated with the country, because it seems that this is an Italian food restaurant.
And Doctor, as you said, they have to be careful if they want to be different. So then what must a business consider first if it is indeed looking to, I guess, glamorize criminals or their vices, perhaps to spruce up that appeal?
Maybe just don't do it.
Yeah, I was going to say, either just leave it well alone.
Maybe just don't do it.
And just try and be cool and creative in another way.
Yes, I think that's the safest choice. And also, it's not like marketing, we always need to be serious, but there's actually a difference in between naming your restaurant with this name versus just one-off event. I think if you just one-off event, people may look at it more at the entertaining side, but naming is, as I mentioned, name is the most important brand equity. So meaning that naming is usually longer term, and that's how like in brand building, naming is the most important thing. If you name your restaurant this certain name, that means you want to play around it with it on an ongoing basis. So that part is actually very risky if you want to associate with some negative
Because for
connection.
good brand equity, you would want a positive association with your brand, wouldn't you, rather than a negative one? I'll give you an example. Okay, let's say it's not the name of a criminal, but there is this burger place in the east in I-12 Katong, and it's known as Nothing But Cheeseburgers, but it goes by its acronym, and that is NBCB Burger, which is also the acronym for some swear words in Singapore. And all their branding and all their paraphernalia and everything, it's NBCB Burgers, which for them stands for Nothing But Cheeseburgers. So what do you think? I mean, it's supposed to be cheeky, Dr. Chang, but do you want to have a negative association?
I think brands are usually trying very hard to be different, and we now know that it's a very competitive place for almost all industry. That's why I think brands trying sometimes a little bit too hard to establish that differentiation. But being associated, again, depends on how you associate. I think sometimes even though you associate with a fictional figure, like people can get it, the really the entertaining side. For example, Soprano, something like that. It's not real. But even for that, because it's negative, you don't want to really play like too high profile on that as well. So basically, to summarize, as a brand guardian, we always need to be careful about the potential risk associated with brand activities.
And there's so many other beautiful Italian words that we could use instead of coffee. But
I got a favorite local store that I like.
Yeah.
The branding, it's just ridiculous. It's so all the dresses, it's a lady's shop. On the escalator I pass by, but it always makes me chuckle. All the clothes I think are in a shade of purple, but the brand name is Purpur, Purpur, which is like, I guess, an affectation of how we locally pronounce purple. But for some reason, it just puts a smile on my face because it's funny. I just remember it.
And you remember it.
So
that's the whole thing. So there you go. But Doctor, you mentioned, I think we're all in agreement that just leave the criminals, alone when thinking about a campaign or thinking about a name for a restaurant or another entity. But are there other certain themes that should be out of the question altogether when considering ideas for marketing campaigns?
I think there are lots of things to consider. For example, in celebrity endorsement, right? So you want to, there's always risk with celebrity endorsement. But if you choose someone who's already controversial, for example, Kanye West, and that's why actually Adidas is losing a lot of money, right? So even though when you in your choice, you're choosing a relatively safe one, you cannot guarantee it's always safe. There could be negative issues during the whole kind of endorsement period. So that's all the things, the potential risk that companies need to consider. But for big organizations, they actually have more resources in terms of like crisis management. So they can be prepared for it.
And their due diligence, they can research ahead of time whether or not this is a good candidate, for example.
Yeah, and for small companies, really, you shouldn't take the risk because you should focus on more important things, I think, the business side instead. Very
good advice. I want to end off on this point, which is if some offense has been created, let's say cultural or religious beliefs have been offended through marketing efforts, what's your advice for the business in terms of the recourse that they should take? This Italian restaurant, for example, has apologized and says they're going to consider all options moving forward in naming itself. What would you say is the best route to take for the business in question?
I think they are doing exactly the right thing, actually being honest, because as I mentioned, being innovative is part of marketing. So we all make mistakes, and brands for individuals is the same. As long as you can be honest, like admit, like it's probably due to ignorance or didn't think so much about the negative consequences. I think like the market is forgiving in that sense, as long as you are honest.
Yes, indeed. Should you change the name immediately? Will you lose branding if you do that?
Yes.
Yeah, you do lose
definitely.
branding. Definitely change?
No, definitely change. Because even the embassy come out. I mean, I think they have to change in this case.
Yeah, exactly. Dr. Chang, always a pleasure having you back on the show. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me. You have a good weekend ahead.
You too. She's Dr. Diana Chang, Senior Lecturer, Marketing Program, School of Business of the Singapore University of Social Sciences. This is Singapore Today. You got any names that come to